Welcome back to Blasphemous Nutrition. I recently had the utmost pleasure of chatting with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, who you may have heard of if you've been in the ancestral or paleo circles for any length of time. This woman is now considered straight up flippin' blasphemous in these circles for her bold willingness to challenge her own biases and go back to the research to revisit some strongly held beliefs in the health and wellness communities. In today's conversation, Dr. Sarah shares how she came to realize she needed to go back to the drawing board, the never-before revealed moment she made a decision that would forever change the trajectory of her career, what she discovered in doing so, and how she manages to stay strong in the face of all of the hate and vitriol from the community that once held her dear. She clears up some cognitive dissonance I had regarding vegetable oils, and we dive into what she, myself, and others have experienced when we started taking a nutrient-first approach to what we eat. You will not want to miss this. So let's dive right in. Hey, Rebels. Welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. Consider this podcast your pantry full of clarity, perspective, and the nuance needed to counter the superficial health advice so freely given on the internet. I'm Amy, the unapologetically candid host of Blasphemous Nutrition and a double-degreed nutritionist with 20 years experience. I'm here to share a more nuanced take on living and eating well to sustain and recover your health. If you've found most health advice to be so generic as to be meaningless, or so extreme that it's unrealistic, and you don't mind the occasional F-bomb, you've come to the right place. From dissecting the latest nutrition trends to breaking down published research and sharing my own clinical experiences, I'm on a mission to foster clarity amidst all the confusion and empower you to have the health you need to live a life you love. Now let's get started. Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, PhD, is the founder of Nutrivore.com and New York Times best-selling author of Nutrivore, the radical new science for getting the nutrients you need from the food you eat. With Nutrivore, Dr. Sarah has created a positive and inclusive approach to dietary guidance based on the scientific literature and devoid of dogma, using just nutrient density and nutrient sufficiency as its basic principles. To learn more about Nutrivore, just go down to the show notes where you can get links to the website, and Dr. Sarah has also generously offered up 5 of her Nutrivore guides for you to get started right away. I've dropped those in the show notes as well so that you can check them out. Okay, let's get started. Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition.
I am very excited to be here. So
You're pumped too.
This is going to be fun. Okay. I hear I have full permission to swear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a given the title of the podcast. So, like, all your naughty words are welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a safe space for naughtiness.
Okay. I don't know if I am capable. I know I'm capable of saying naughty words. Right. I don't know if I'm capable of saying them on Zoom. So we'll find out.
Understandable.
Yeah. We'll find out. I'm so used to the mesh filter.
It's not your default leaning, right?
No.
I have to say, I have wanted you on this podcast since its inception because your career has been peppered with blasphemy.
That's so true. Yes.
And so I feel
in fact, most of my social media posts these days, I think amount to blasphemy. Yeah,
exactly. And, you've had this arc throughout your career of being a science communicator and a health educator, but you've always been a little bit of an outlier and you haven't followed the norms in health and nutrition, initially highlighting the role that food intolerances play in autoimmune conditions, which at that time was not common knowledge.
Yep.
And now it is. And then more recently, you've really shifted directions into focusing exclusively on nutrient density, as well as busting some of the nutrition myths that refuse to die.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about the experience that you've had in that transition towards nutrient density, because I've known about you and followed you for a very long time. When I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2013, you were the first person I thought of. I immediately went out and got the book thinking, oh, I just will do this and everything will be fine. And my path didn't end up looking like that. But I've known about you for a really long time, and have dabbled in the ancestral and paleo communities. And I know there are a lot of people in those communities who are like, their asses are chapped because of what has happened. So I'm really wanting to hear more about that transition. What led you to take such a strong stand, especially in light of the opposition that you faced? And how has it been facing those winds of opposition with the position that you've taken?
So I wish I could say I had an epiphany, like a eureka moment where all of the pieces, like I just had this realization, all the pieces fell into place. But I did not. I had a nerdiness for understanding how nutrients affect different biological systems. I was really interested in understanding how the gut microbiome and intestinal permeability affect the rest of our biology. And so I think it was 2015. It might have been 2016, somewhere a million years ago, approximately. I was offered the opportunity to write a book on the gut microbiome. And the first couple years of this project, it looked very much like me parroting everything that I held to be true at the time. And then this is the funny part of the story that I have never told anyone before. I had a sulfa drug allergic reaction and was put on Demerol for the pain. So pretty intense opioid. And I spent 5 days high as a kite. And in those 5 days, I decided to throw out my entire manuscript and start fresh, and completely re-outlined this gut health book to be solely focused on the gut microbiome. I called my research assistant and I said, this is what we're doing. You know what? It turned out to be a fantastic decision, because that basically meant that this small piece of what the original version of this book was going to look like became my entire focus. And I knew enough to know it was really important, but not really like understand the immense complexity of this, microbial ecosystem. And so I then spent the next 3-4 years learning everything I could about the gut microbiome. And that brought me to studies that went, hey, look at how amazing lentils are for feeding probiotic strains of bacteria. And look at how it increases their metabolic activity in this really beneficial way. And I was like, well, I'm in the camp here where lentils have lectins and therefore they're bad, right? Like, I don't eat lentils, but here I am looking at these 12 different studies that show me how great they are. And then there'd be the next study, right? Like, okay, well, I can wrap my head around lentils, but now I'm looking at chickpeas. Well, okay, now I'm looking at black beans. Now I'm looking at oats, right? Now I'm looking at corn, right? And I kept being faced with these studies where if I looked at health through the lens of the gut microbiome, these foods that I was afraid of, I was learning were really beneficial for me, and that my fear and avoidance of these foods was actually potentially negatively impacting my health. And so I started adding these foods back in cautiously. I had a lot of food fear. The first few, I wasn't sure if the food wasn't working for me or if it was a stress response, right? Like, and I realized later it was a stress response. There was a lot of anxiety around trying these foods. What if this causes a flare, right? What if this is a catastrophic failure? But the more of these foods I ate, the better I felt. And I started to realize that I had a learned eating disorder, that I had learned food fear, as so many of us did in the ancestral community. And that fear was stopping me from improving my diet quality. And so as I was sort of wrapping up this project, which never ended up getting published, I felt like, okay, well, I've got this collection of foods now that I was wrong about that I need to start talking about. So I started communicating about them in my newsletter and on social media in 2019. So saying, hey, lentils actually, surprisingly, look at all these benefits. And I started to realize that this way of thinking that I had been taught when I first entered the wellness community of if you have this compound in a food that stimulates the immune system, then that food is inflammatory, right? Or if you have this compound in this food that increases intestinal permeability, then that food is bad for gut health, right? But in reality, foods are chemically complex. There's lots of different things in them. And just because one compound might not be beneficial, that doesn't mean the whole food is bad, right? We are compensated with a variety of nutritive compounds that may, okay, well, this compound maybe increases intestinal permeability, but these 10 compounds decrease intestinal permeability. So overall, you have improved gut health, right? And so I started to look at studies differently, and I started to look at different types of studies. So I started looking at more like big picture, right? All-cause mortality, looking at cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality, cancer incidence and mortality, right? The really big picture stuff, whereas I had been taught to look at food in this very myopic way. And the more I did that, the more I deepened my knowledge and had to confront how much I had gotten wrong, the more I felt this like moral imperative to talk about it, right? So the more I felt like, okay, well, I was wrong. And now everyone needs to know I was wrong because I don't want this wrong thing out there. Like I taught people a wrong thing. That's terrible. I need to unteach them that and teach them the right thing now. And so in 2020, I started my rebrand to Nutrivore because my diet certainly didn't look like paleo anymore. I couldn't stand by that. I can't stand by those recommendations. I don't believe in those. I've added in every food but gluten at this point. And gluten, I sadly still don't get along. But that's fantastic because holy smokes, was I avoiding a whole lot of other foods for a decade.
Yeah.
And they're all part of my regular diet now, right? Like my quality of life, thanks to delicious food, is way higher. But so is my health, right? So things really fell into place as I figured this out and really not just shifted my academic approach to understanding nutritional sciences, but the psychology of it, right? And the psychology of how do I approach diet? How do I think about food? And thinking about foods in terms of the nutrients they contain and the health benefits they deliver rather than, oh, but they have this one compound in it. Right. Because that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Yep. What matters is the overall effects, right? So initially, I think when it was, let's add in this one food, right? Initially, I think the response from my audience was maybe a little bit dubious, but let's see where this goes, right? Like it was overall accepting. Okay, I can wrap my head around paleo plus lentils, right? Okay, if lentils are okay, I can wrap my head around chickpeas, being good too, fine, okay. Ooh, I'm not sure what I think about oats, but I suppose if we get gluten-free sprouted oats, then maybe this is okay, right? There's this like fair amount of like skepticism, but also like, I'll entertain this, right?
Right.
I can, this still feels philosophically compatible. But the more as I developed Nutrivore and launched the website and wrote the book, I had to start facing even more uncomfortable science that showed me other things that I got wrong that really, for my audience, did not feel anymore like the same philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So vegetable oils being beneficial, not needing to waste money on organic foods, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio being meaningless, like bigger things that I got wrong in the past. That as I'm looking at the science in this, I think, more rigorous way, I can say, okay, like here's how I bought into this myth in the past. Like there's this scientific grain of truth. If you look at it in this myopic way, here it is. Here's the evidence-based recommendation. And I think that as I got into, as you said, these like myths that won't die, right? Zombie nutrition myths. That's when the reception changed. So I would say still overall, first of all, I have a lot of new audience who is like here for it, who's like, the nutrivore dietary philosophy is the most liberating, amazing thing ever. And I love this, positive, refreshing, any food can fit into a healthy diet approach. And then there's this section of my audience that has followed my journey and kind of done the same thing, right? Opened their eyes to realizing they were wrong before and have expanded their diets and feel so much better, right? Like a similar type of like personal health journey to what I've undergone at the same time. And then there's this part of my audience that like, that was, okay, now it doesn't feel good, right? Now it's a step too far. And now you must be a sellout, right? Who's paying you to say this?
Right. Yeah. Who are you
right?
selling out to? Like, where's the big canola?
Right.
Or media.
Actually, that is true. So that would be a logical assumption. But yeah, no, I think there's this part of my audience now that they were okay. Yeah, I'm skeptical, but I'll follow. But wait a second, vegetable oils are good now? No way. Okay, now I'm angry about this whole situation, and look, like it doesn't feel good to have people accuse you of being nefarious, right? And I get it from both sides. So I get it both from this, I must have sold out, right? Somebody's paying me to say all this stuff. People sort of feeling betrayed by the information that I'm putting out now. And then also people the other way, feeling betrayed that I taught them something wrong. Which, I mean, valid. I didn't mean to. I thought I was right. I thought I was helping. But yes, being angry at me for being wrong in the past, I feel is a very valid emotion, and I understand. But I'm also human, and I think there's an example to be made of my story. If someone with a PhD in medical biophysics, who was a medical researcher, can fall for nutrition misinformation and pseudoscientific thought patterns, then everyone can. And that's why you see so many doctors and PhDs spreading nutrition misinformation online, right? It's not, there's definitely grifters. I'm not saying there's none, but the majority of that community are people who are well-meaning and think that their message is really important and they're doing something good. Like that's what I thought. And so I think there's like a understanding that we're all susceptible to misinformation. Even a scientist, right? Even a doctor, I think can be helpful for someone to face their own confirmation bias, right? I think part of what keeps people stuck in believing myths, right? Conspiracy theories, is not wanting to feel like I was a victim, right? Not wanting to feel like I was gullible. There's other parts of that, the psychology of this, right? Like we definitely want a scapegoat, right? We want someone to blame for all of our problems, right? Like,
and then these sort of, I should have known better, the self-shame.
Right.
Yeah.
There's other aspects, but I think that I don't want to feel like you got me, that I could be susceptible to that is part of it. And I think it's part of, right, not just what's happening in nutrition right now, but I think that's really a broader, right? That's why people will get into those like pig butchering scams, and they'll recognize on the third remortgage of their house that this is they're probably being scammed, and they like refuse to believe it, right? Because they don't want to think that they could be a victim. They don't want to think that they could be vulnerable to this. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm so open about having been wrong before and talking about the slow, gradual return to evidence-based recommendations is because it's my hope that helps give people permission to go, oh, well, if that person with that education over there could fall for this, like, no wonder I did. It's okay. And then hopefully that'll make that person be even more open to learning that new thing that helps to correct that misinformation. But yeah, I would say, lately talking about especially vegetable oils and organic versus conventional foods and pesticide residues, that has opened up the floodgates for a lot of anger.
Mm-hmm.
And that has led to far more personal attacks than talking about lentils or oats or corn, right, ever did, right?
Now it's
much
personal.
more. Yeah, now it's
I can understand
going
but
personal.
But you're telling me Weston's okay. You're going down.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really hard for people who are really still stuck in that fear-based sort of restrictive mindset with food. People who really need a simple solution, right? Like they need one boogeyman to blame for all of health things, right? So it's ultra processed foods and additives and food dyes and MSG and whatever, or it's vegetable oils or, all of those things kind of go together. And they're not ready for the science. They're not ready to learn. And they can't hear me talk about it and hear what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They can only hear suspicion about why I'm saying it. And I mean, I understand. I used to be in that world. But I still feel, so my overwhelming emotion is, wow, it's really important to get this information out there. It's really important to keep talking about it. It's really important to show all my work and show all of the citations and do these like super rigorous scientific breakdowns of every aspect of this myth so that you can point by point rebuttal, right? And it's really important to answer people's questions with kindness and compassion and understanding of, yeah, these myths are really easy to believe, while blocking people who are like over the top, yeah, asshole. Yes.
And there are many over the top assholes on the internet.
I don't think the internet is a place where most people are their best selves.
Yeah, it's easy not to be.
It's easy to forget there's somebody else on the other side of that comment section, right? The
Very much
person who's
so.
going to read what you just typed is a real life person. And I think there's too often people feel comfortable typing something they would never, ever say to someone's face.
Exactly.
I'm sure some of these people would have said that thing to my face too. But yeah, no, the overwhelming response is positive. But I am a hard on my sleeve type person. So I can read 100 wonderful, thank you so much for this comments. And then the one, you must drink baby's blood, conspiracy theory attacks bugs me. I mean, I'm really upset by them. So really, for all of this stuff, my whole team has been helping me to sort of filter those comments and try to help me see as little of it as possible. But then it bugs my team too, right? Like,
Yeah.
the resources that I'm creating now, I'm not a one-woman show. I'm the face of Nutrivore for sure. And I'm the master brains. I don't know what to there's a word I'm looking for, but I don't know what it is.
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister. I'm the Prime Minister of Nutrivore. But I am supported by 7 wonderful women who contribute to different aspects. So it's no longer, this is one of the things that I put in place when I realized how much I'd gotten wrong in the past. I was like, part of the problem there was not having a community of people with science backgrounds or who are really like talented researchers to be able to talk through scientific studies with, or like and that interpretation, to talk through how to communicate different aspects. And so now with my team, nothing is one person's work anymore. It's always a collaborative effort. So we have multiple brains, in part to make sure that we're maintaining that really high level of scientific accuracy and rigor, is to have let's have 3 different people read this paper and make sure that we all agree that this is the conclusion, right? And so when I bring my team in to help reply to comments online, it's their work too. Their name on YouTube, or whoever's contributed to an article has their name on it. So you'll see there's multiple authors on most of those articles. So when I put out content that riles the trolls, my team is very helpful in trying to shield me from the really aggressive, mean, not productive, right? Like not a good faith question.
Yeah,
Type comments. But yeah, it's hard for them too, So we're also trying to like make sure that everyone gets breaks, right? Everyone is actually taking weekends, even if it's not Saturdays and Sundays, right? To just give everyone some moments to unplug and not have to face that vitriol.
I want to circle back around to the vegetable oil because that's an area where I do still have a lot of cognitive dissonance. I use vegetable oils in my home. I started using sunflower oil because it has such a high vitamin E content, and that's an area where I'm chronically like missing the mark. And of course, olive oil has always kind of had a pass as being okay as a vegetable oil. But one of the things that I was taught in school was that at the university level was that our polyunsaturated fats are by their very nature very delicate, and they're sensitive to light and heat and oxygen. And that most of the vegetable oils that we consume undergo a process that exposes them to very high heat. And then they are bleached and deodorized so that they have that nice uniform color and very neutral flavor. And then it gets put in a plastic bottle on the shelf. And my understanding is that high heat makes the oil rancid. And that is why it needs to be.
You see how excited I am?
I do. Because you're about to like bust this for me. And I'm kind of excited about that. So this is what I learned. And it's hard for me to understand how a seed oil that is not cold pressed, and even cold pressing is questionable, right? Because there are rumors. How can it undergo that kind of processing and be healthy? Like, what am I missing here?
Yeah. So I'm so excited for this. Thank you for the opportunity to bust vegetable oil myths. I'm very excited about this. So let's talk a little bit about oxidation potential, because I think that's really important. So polyunsaturated fats, omega-6s and omega-3s, have very similar oxidation potential to saturated fat and much lower oxidation potential compared to monounsaturated fat. So oleic acid is uniquely awesome in terms of oxidation potential. Everything else is pretty similar in terms of oxidation.
For our audience who don't have that background, what is oxidation potential? What is oleic acid? And can you break that a step further?
So oxidation refers to reacting with oxygen. And that typically, we're talking about damaging a molecule in some way. So the reason why we like antioxidants is because they either help to block that initial reaction with oxygen, or they help to mop up the production of these damaged molecules that have reacted with oxygen. So oxidizing, right? An oxidant, it's all just reactions with oxygen. When we're talking about something like a fat, or we're talking about DNA or a protein in the body, we're talking about damaging the molecule in some way so that it can no longer do what it's supposed to do. Right. So you're right that rancidity, right? So an oil going bad, that oxidation is the process. And what's really important to know about oxidation is that it's a chain reaction. So the more oxidized your oil is to start with, the faster the rest of the oil will go rancid, right? The rest of the oil will oxidize. And there's other impurities that you can have in an oil that will also kind of act like a chain reaction, like a catalyst, right? Propel rancidity. So if you recall a few years ago, there was like a whole like big discovery that a lot of fish oils were rancid. Mm-hmm. And it was because you start off with a fairly small amount that's oxidized, a small amount that's undergone this lipid peroxidation, and that catalyzes the rest of the oil. So that like basically creates this chain reaction with the rest of the oil. It goes rancid faster. And the key here is to start with a very low amount of oxidation initially, right? So that will increase your shelf life. Other things you can do, right? Store it in cold, store it in the dark. Don't stir a bunch of oxygen into it, right? Don't heat it up, right? Other things we can do to reduce oxidation, right? So by chilling it, you don't have as much molecule vibration. So you just slow down chemical reactions.
But doesn't it undergo high heat? Doesn't it undergo high heat in the actual processing? How is it not a rancid oil when it gets to us?
The high heat step is done under vacuum. So it's done in a pressure vessel. So you can't oxidize without oxygen. So it's done in a low oxygen environment. So you don't get oxidation of the fat in the high heat step. The way vegetable oils are industrially processed, so first they're mixed with a solvent to help separate the oil from the fibrous material. That solvent is typically hexane.
Yep.
Then there's a gentle heating step. So hexane evaporates at a very, very low temperature.
Yeah.
So a gentle heating step to evaporate the hexane. There's usually none left at the end. The amount that's left in when it is detectable, you'd have to drink like 11 gallons of vegetable oil every single day for chronic toxicity. So we don't need to worry about it. But it's usually not detectable. Then it undergoes a high heat extraction step that's done under pressure. So it's done in a low oxygen environment. It's cooled down. And then the bleaching step is done with bleaching clay, not bleach. So that's actually mechanical, not chemical. So the same way you might use clay toothpaste to remove the stains from your teeth. It's the same type of idea. So that clay attracts molecules like chlorophyll, carotenoids. It also actually will attract some like heterocyclic amines that potentially, because there is a tiny bit of oxygen right at the beginning of the heating step. So you can get a tiny bit of that. That's actually separated out by the bleaching clay as well. And then the rest of the filtration steps are also all mechanical, right? And so that is really important because those things that are removed with the bleaching clay are all things that would contribute to more chain reaction oxidation.
Right. Right.
So chlorophyll will, I don't know specifically about carotenoids. It's one of the reasons it also like makes it a more neutral tasting, lighter colored oil. But that removing those impurities in those steps actually helps to create a more pure oil that has fewer things that will contribute to a chain reaction. And actually, lipid peroxidation is part of the quality control for every batch. It is tightly controlled. And I think it has to be below 0.5%, might be 0.05%. I don't remember exactly what the number is, but there is a threshold that ensures every batch has to basically be not oxidized before it can go on the shelf. But all of those steps actually make an oil that has a longer shelf life before it goes rancid. So you don't have to worry about the oxidation of vegetable oils. You do if you deep fry in them. If you're deep frying at home, if you're deep frying in vegetable oil, you need to change out that oil more frequently than if you were deep frying in tallow, for example.
Mm-hmm.
A little, I mean, you still need to switch out your oil, even if you're deep frying in tallow. Like all oils are going to undergo
they'll go bad eventually.
Yeah. If you're deep frying in the same oil repeatedly, like definitely that will oxidize the oil over time. If you heat an oil above its smoke point, that'll oxidize it. That's generally not a great thing to do, at least not regularly. And, if you leave an oil in the bright, like on the countertop by the window, that will also cause that oil to go rancid faster. But you're starting off with a more stable oil when you start off with an industrially produced vegetable oil compared to the cold pressed version of the same oil.
Right.
You will have a longer shelf life compared to the cold pressed version, just because you're pulling out all of these things that are going to help, catalyze oxidation. And it's something all oil can still go rancid, right? Like any fat can still go rancid. So it's why, paying attention to expiry dates and storing them properly is still important.
Thank you so much for explaining that.
I'm so glad.
And I just vacuum. I was like, wow, but
Yeah, it's done in a pressure vessel. Yeah,
well, deep now that, yeah.
and also bleach is still mechanical.
Yeah.
It be bleaching, not chemical bleaching. It's not actually bleach, which is another one, right? Like people say, "Oh, I thought it was bleach." No.
Yep. Yeah. And this is perfect because it's those exact omissions of tiny details, whether intentional or unintentional, that then create this whole problem that we're having.
Well, and I mean, I think we're also leveraging, I think, a fear of technology, right? So
Oh, yeah. A
people
naturalistic
don't,
bias is totally at
right?
play. Yeah.
You don't know how your like rayon is made, right? You don't know how your fleece jacket, like you don't see all of the different chemical processes that are going on to make that fabric. You're not seeing what's going into the parts of your car. There's so much industrial manufacturing processes that we are completely separated from. That unless you're watching a lot of documentaries of like how it's made, you don't see, right? You don't see what this big machinery looks like. And you don't have a sense for, oh, that machine looks really dirty, but it's actually in a clean room, right? Like you don't have a sense for how clean and regulated these things are. What hits the news is like the one factory out of 300 that had some kind of like issue at it, right? Where it had some infestation of something, right?
Which is why it's news.
Right.
Up the norm.
But so the visuals we get are, right, there's this How It's Made article for How It's Made episode that covered vegetable oils from 15 years ago or something like that. And it's often used to show how disgusting vegetable oils are when they're showing the fibrous material that's being removed, right? They're showing the stuff that's being discarded, not the actual oil, but it's sort of like this visual of sludge. But I don't even think that visual would have an impact if we were more connected the manufacturing sector, right? Just like how everything is made. If you find that disgusting, then definitely don't eat hot dogs, right? But I'm not saying don't eat hot dogs. Like have a hot dog. It's fine. But I think that, part of it is just we're very disconnected from how our food is made, how our food is grown. We're very disconnected from what factories look like, what things, intermediate steps of things look like. If you saw penicillin being made, you would be disgusted by a few of those steps, right? Like that. It's not to say be afraid of penicillin. I'm just saying this is not something that we're exposed to on a daily basis because it would be dangerous, right? Right. Unclean to be just walking on factory floors for fun. But I think that, it just kind of helps to kind of go, industrial means big, right? That's what it means. It means we used technology to upscale this. That's what it means. It's not a scary word. It shows you a technological advancement, right? It's how we can support the global population is because of industry. And so just because something is industrial, it doesn't mean that it is scary. We want to understand what are the steps, right? Where's the quality control? Well, where'd that hexane go? Because that's good to know. I don't want that in the finished oil, right? All of those, it's helpful to understand, but it's because we don't have a comfort with this entire industry that makes us more susceptible to, oh, they do what now? Oh, that machine looks really gross. I don't want that, right? Like, yeah.
So all of the work that you've done the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years now, as you've made this transition, has kind of culminated in the Nutrivore book that you released earlier this year. And you had mentioned in your book that more than half of the U.S. population is falling short of at least 4 essential nutrients.
Yeah.
And then more than 90% of us are not getting enough nutrients from the foods that we eat.
Reverse.
Okay.
4 essential nutrients that 90% or more of us are not getting enough of, and 10 essential nutrients that half or more of us are not getting enough of. And that
nutrients are
study, so the top one is vitamin D, which I feel like we can maybe stick off into its own little category.
Yeah.
So 100% of people, or 99.9999999% of people.
We're not walking around naked anymore, making it from the sun. And
right.
It's difficult to get food alone.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like, we don't need to get it just from food. So to say 100% of us are not getting enough from our diets, we do make it in response to the sun. About 75% of us are deficient or insufficient is the more, I think, important statistic there. That's still a scary statistic. It's still not great.
Considering all the things vitamin D does.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 300 different things in our bodies, at least. So yeah, vitamin D is a really interesting nutrient because it is a steroid hormone, right? There's no other vitamins that are steroid hormones.
Been misnamed.
Yeah. Yes, it should probably be devitamized. And there's probably some other compounds that should be vitamized, like choline. Choline should get a number. Come on, let's give choline a name and number now. It should be B13, I guess. Let's skip over 13, give it B14. Yeah. So there's probably some other things that should be elevated to vitamin status. But yeah, so vitamin D is tacked up, but I think it's kind of a weird one. The next most common nutrient shortfall is potassium. 97.8% of Americans don't get enough dietary potassium.
Wow.
And that's interesting too. So there's two different reasons behind all of these shortfalls. So one is the sort of types of foods that people are eating, right? More ultra processed foods, refined grains, right? Things that don't have a lot of nutrition. And the things that we're short on are the things that are not fortified into those foods.
Exactly.
The other reason, though, that can be contributing is how hard these nutrients are to get. And potassium is definitely that's a hard one to get enough of, right? There's very few foods that have more than 10 or 12% of the daily value of potassium. So if you're only getting 10% in a serving, you need to pick 10 foods that have at least 10% of the daily value of potassium per day in order to hit the daily value. So potassium is kind of a hard one. The next most common nutrient shortfall is vitamin E. So our most important fat-soluble vitamin, our reason for choosing sunflower oil. 96% of people don't get enough vitamin E. And like the best food sources are nuts, seeds, right? Peanut butter would be a great food source. Avocado. It's not actually hard, but I think part of why we don't get enough is diet. No, the whole reason we don't get enough is diet culture.
If you're still gonna say there's enough of us alive who got our nutrition education in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. I mean, so as a fat soluble nutrient, right? You're talking about something that is found in these fatty foods that we were all told to be terrible in the 80s, but also they're high calorie foods, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're not afraid of fat, you might not be eating very much nuts or seeds because like 300 calories in a palmful, right? Like it's such an energy dense food that palmful might give you all the vitamin E you need. But it's a food that is, I think, eaten in very low quantities by a lot of people because they're sort of afraid of the fat or the calories. And then one of the downfalls of vegetable oil industrial processing is that it does remove a lot of the vitamin E, right? So when you have the cold pressed version, you are going to get a lot more vitamin E. I know for olive oil, like the difference between a refined olive oil and an extra virgin olive oil is like 50 times difference vitamin E.
Damn.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. And it will vary. Like different extra virgin olive oils are going to have very different levels of vitamin E.
Right. Just like
They're all going to have a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So vitamin E is the third. And then the fourth is folate, vitamin B9. So it's about 90% of people don't get enough vitamin B9.
Even with fortification of the food system, or is that data from beforehand?
Yes. That's even with fortification.
Shit.
So, and it's interesting because folate's not hard to get, right? Poultry's a good source of folate. Legumes in general are a good source of folate. And it's a water-soluble vitamin too. So like have as much of it as you want. There's no tolerable upper limit. Go nuts. Probably not go super nuts, but
your digestive system will probably discourage you from eating 2 pounds of beans and a pound of greens in a day.
Yeah.
But it won't take that much.
So I'm going to pull up my notes because I have to remember the other 10 here. So 80% of us don't get enough vitamin A, and that's counting carotenoids, like vitamin A precursors in the math. That's even counting things like beta carotene in carrots. 72% of us don't get enough vitamin K. What's crazy about that is that it would take like a half cup of spinach per day
Yeah. It's
to hit our vitamin
is
K
so
levels.
easy. But I
So
think
easy to get from green vegetables.
the last data I saw was, I think, like the average American, I want to say, gets 2 tablespoons of leafy greens a day, which is why we're not hitting that vitamin K.
Yeah, and that's the average. Because I know I'm bringing up that average.
I know I am too.
I am definitely contributing to the high end of that math. Yeah, so I mean, the average American consumes 1.6 servings of vegetables per day. And most of the science points to like 3 to 5 servings as being optimal. So that means that the average consumption is at best half
Right.
of what would improve our health outcomes. And so a lot of these nutrients are like vegetable nutrients, right? So next after vitamin K is magnesium, also found in green vegetables.
Yep.
66% of us don't get enough magnesium. Then vitamin B1, another fortification vitamin.
Thiamine, yeah.
56.3% don't get enough thiamine. Yeah, so even though that's fortified in grains, then calcium, 55% of us don't get enough calcium. And then vitamin C, 52% of us don't get enough vitamin C. Vitamin C is also really easy to get, and the daily values are really low for vitamin C.
Yeah.
Right? Like the daily values are 75 milligrams for adult females and 90 milligrams for adult males. But the tolerable upper limit for vitamin C is 2,000 milligrams. And there's studies where they have therapeutic doses of vitamin C up to like 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day. It seems to be safe with the exception of maybe ticking up kidney stone risk in males. So that is like the one caveat. So the reason why the tolerable upper limit for vitamin C is set is because that's where gastric side effects start to occur, because it can be a little
stool loosener.
Laxative effect. So yeah. And that's data pulled from a paper that didn't include fiber. Fiber looks like it's 90 to 95% of people who don't get enough fiber.
Yeah.
Polyphenols don't
matches
have
what I see clinically.
Yeah. Polyphenols don't have a recommended dietary allowance set yet. But if you just I think we'll get there. But if you even just assume like 300 milligrams per day, which is so low, like really probably if it ever does get that, it'll be like 500 to 800 milligrams probably. But even if you just assume a target of 300 milligrams, like 75% of people don't even get that. Even with coffee, don't get even 300 milligrams of polyphenols per day. So there's like a whole pile more nutrients that in creating that list weren't even considered.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've done in addition to writing your book is creating a lot of resources for people to help them better understand which foods are most nutrient dense, where they can get these foods, sources of these nutrients that we are, generally speaking, in the population chronically low in, so that they can start to include them more in their regular eating habits. But there's a lot of people, there are people out there who are kind of stressed out, and they have a lot of decision fatigue and overwhelm already. So for individuals who are in that position where they look at this list of foods that are high in folate or high in vitamin C, and they're like, well, which one should I choose? How do I put this together? Is there a formula or an anchoring structure that someone can use to make that process easier to implement?
Yeah. So I've tried to create different resources for different types of people. So depending on where your starting point is, we've got a different first step, right? So if you're getting most of your meals through the drive-thru, maybe our first step is to add a side salad, right? Or to buy a bag of apples on the weekend and pack an apple to have for a snack at work instead of grabbing a snack from the vending machine, right? So there's that person. And then there's the person who's put a ton of effort into their diet. And honestly, like the biggest thing is getting over those food fears.
Yeah.
And feeling comfortable expanding diet. And I would actually say, before even a formula, I would say, let's start there. Let's actually even just start there. Let's start with one at a time, right? Let's be methodical about it. starting to add some of these foods that are really nutrient dense, health promoting foods that we've been afraid of, and just work on that comfort level. And that can help bring the stress level down. So that stress comes from it comes from multiple places, but a lot of it comes from what will happen to me if, will this food give me joint pain or upset my stomach or make me gain weight, right? What is the thing that I'm so terrified of will happen when I eat this food? And so I think working on that permission piece can be a really important first step. Nutrivore, I think, kind of lives in between diet and anti-diet, right? So we want to improve diet quality. We want to adopt healthy long-term eating patterns while continuing to eat our favorite foods, while getting a joy from our diets. So without that like restrictive mindset. So for trapped in restriction, I think just working on, okay, I haven't been eating grains, right? I'm going to go buy myself some rice and see how that goes, right? We don't need to jump all the way to gluten. We start easy. Gluten and I still don't get along. So also it's an opportunity to really find where are the real barriers, right? What is the real food I can't eat versus what am I avoiding unnecessarily, right? So I think there's like a starting point there. If we're at I'm just ready to get my nutrients, tell me what to eat. The resource I have is called the Nutrivore Weekly Serving Matrix. And it is a formula for crafting meals and serving guidelines for servings that you'll meet over the entire week. So you can get 3 of those servings on Sunday if you want, or you can get one Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Just anytime over the week. We're looking at averages. That's what matters for long-term health. And that is the most formulaic resource that I've created. So it is, your protein servings, your starchy food servings, your vegetables, your fruit. So that's how you're focusing on per day. And then per week, there's 10 additional food families to focus on that give us basically like the full range of nutrients that are really important for health. And then there's some like bonus for the overachievers. And then it also helps us track dietary diversity, and like eating the full rainbow is all incorporated into that. If you follow that formula, depending on your energy requirements, most people can hit 100% daily value of all essential nutrients in 50 to 75% of their caloric intake. So it expedites the Nutrivore goal of getting all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. It's not the only way. If there's a food in there that you hate, you don't have to eat it. If you're allergic to seafood, please don't eat it, right? There's other ways to get those nutrients. Or if there isn't, in the case of seafood, if you're allergic to fish and shellfish, or you don't eat fish and shellfish for, religious reasons or ethical reasons, right? Or medical reasons, the nutrient that you're missing out on is omega-3 fats. Yep. So the supplement strategy there would probably be algal oil. So that's the other thing about these resources is I've tried to make them flexible for different dietary preferences. So if you have a diet that you love, you don't have to change it, that you can use Nutrivore resources to tweak your food choices so that you're getting more nutrients, or identify, in this case, I don't eat seafood. There's not a good source to get enough omega-3s. It identifies the necessity for a supplementation strategy. So with Nutrivore, it's always preferable to get our nutrients from food, but there's always situations where that's not possible. And when it's not, the Nutrivore sort of educational ecosystem also helps identify when we need to make changes to our diet versus also when we need to potentially talk to our doctor or dietitian or nutritionist or health coach about a supplement.
Yeah, great. Another common belief is that transitioning to a more whole foods, healthier diet with lots of vegetables and proteins is going to be prohibitively expensive. So what are some inexpensive, nutrient-dense options kind of top that Nutrivore list for people who are really struggling financially but are committed to improving their health?
So it is more expensive. Studies show that ultra-processed foods cost about half as much as their whole food counterparts. So there is a limit, right? There is a low enough food budget at which this Nutrivore goal is not possible. And it's why we need big systemic change to the food system. That being said, there's a lot of myths about food quality out there that make you feel like you need to buy the more expensive version of something that are just false. So you don't need to buy organic. It's no different health-wise or nutrition-wise. You don't need to buy the grass-fed beef. It's got a bit more nutrition, but it's not a huge difference. Same with wild-caught fish. It's got a bit more nutrition. It's not a huge difference. You're still getting lots of good stuff from the regular old farmed salmon. And we don't need to get all of our protein from animal foods, right? Plant proteins are still fantastic. So fish and shellfish have some unique nutrients that we can't get easily from other foods. But other than a few servings per week of that, we can get the rest of our protein from legumes if we want to, right? That's much more affordable. Canned foods, equally as nutrient dense to fresh. Frozen foods, equally as nutrient dense to fresh. So part of this is you have full permission to go buy the store brand cheapest version of the thing. The mixed frozen vegetables that are in the clearance section, right? At your local Kroger is where I shop. Or the super discounted canned tuna at the box store, right? So those foods will give you the same nutrients as the version that costs 5 times more that's in the fresh food section, or the name brand that costs 5 times more. So that's a huge savings there, is to understand that it nutritionally really doesn't matter if you get the gourmet one or the one that's on super discount. Canned vegetables can be a lot cheaper. Frozen vegetables are definitely, right, a lot cheaper and not going to go bad in the back of the fridge. So reducing food waste can really help expand a food budget. So I would say some of the top priorities for eating a nutrient-dense diet on a budget: frozen vegetables, canned fish, and dry beans. Those 3 right there are going to have most of your nutritional bases covered. Understanding apples or bananas are so much cheaper than grapes, right? Just kind of having that sense of what are the foods that I just get so much more food per dollar. And if you want to get really nerdy, I have a table in the book that I did an analysis of nutrients per dollar, which is a different way of thinking about food budget, right? If you're on a really tight food budget, you want to think about nutrients per dollar and food per dollar, right? You're not just going to use this table. But I basically created 5 different cheapest to most expensive food categories. So rather than looking at dollar per pound or servings per dollar or calories per dollar, it's actually total nutrients per dollar. And so if you're on a really tight budget, you can look at just the cheapest foods in that section and then round out with your typical go-to affordable foods. There's 100 foods, I think, that I had data on to do that table. So it's a pretty good comprehensive table. But don't be afraid of the thing that's on sale or the thing that's the no-name brand or the store brand or the thing that's canned or the thing that's frozen. And then other budget stretching tips, right? Always the more work you do at home, the cheaper the food's going to be, right? If you can buy in bulk, if you have some freezer space so that you can take advantage of, holy smokes, this thing's on super discount right now, I'm going to buy 5 of them and throw them in my freezer. That's not everyone has that privilege, but if you do, that's can be a great strategy. All the strategies you do for anything on a budget, right? Yeah. Always work. But I think that the most important thing for eating a healthy diet on a budget is knowing that all of those things telling you to buy the most expensive olive oil, the most expensive organic fruits and vegetables, the most expensive wild-caught salmon and grass-fed beef, it's not actually based in science. You're getting tons of nutrition. There's been some scientific studies where they calculate if you were unlucky enough to have the lowest nutrition version of this vegetable, right? Or this grain product or whatever, but you followed the dietary guidelines, how easy it would be to meet your nutritional needs. Super easy. Super easy. Yeah. So we really don't need to worry about, oh, well, this version's 10% more nutrient dense than this version. Just get what fits your budget that you enjoy.
Great. One of the things I've noticed in my private practice over the last 5 years that I've been also focusing more on nutrients first rather than this protocol or that protocol is how much including foods based upon their nutrient status and looking at food through that lens of the nutrition it provides you has such potential to heal food trauma.
Yes.
I see it time and time again with my clients who come in with these ideas about, well, avocados are bad because they're high in fat, or carbs are bad because it raises your insulin. And they start to shift out of that fear into a really welcoming place where they are then excited to eat these foods that they've been taught were bad.
Yeah.
Because they see the nutrients that they have, and then they start to feel. And it sounds a little bit like the experience that you had after looking at the data and, like boldly went out and had some lentils.
Well, I don't know how bold it was. It was pretty trepidatious, but
I did that with meat the first time. I don't think I've ever told you this story. I was vegetarian for 13 years, and my body started telling me it wanted steak. And I was like, no, you don't. No, you don't. For like a year. And then I had an epiphany. And so I went to Whole Foods and I asked for a sample of the steak, and I took it and I walked, because I was on the board of Earth Save at that point in time. Not the national, but my local chapter. So people knew me, and they knew me as a vegetarian. And so I took this beef sample and I walked and found an aisle where nobody was, and nibbled on it, hoping that nobody would see me commit this blasphemous act of betrayal, hoping that it would make me sick so that I could just be done with this idea. And my body loved it. So that was like
vitamin B12. We've got it.
Oh, so much. And zinc, and there was so much. There's so much I needed. Anyway, what is some of the feedback that you're getting from people who have read Nutrivore, who are following you online, utilizing these resources, regarding the mindset shift that they're having as they're focusing on the nutrients?
That's the most dominant feedback, is people feel liberated. So I would say 90% of the feedback amounts to, my diet is better quality. I'm more consistent with my food choices. And my stress is so much lower. I just feel so liberated that I can still enjoy a cookie and have a slice of birthday cake, right? I can still eat what I want. And being able to do that has allowed me to focus my choices on these more nutrient-dense foods. So almost all of the feedback sort of amounts to feeling like this is the most refreshing perspective, and it just feels like, finally all the pieces are falling into place for me in terms of health-wise. And then you kind of get flavors of that, where you get, I had been trying to lose weight for years and just going up and down. And then I followed Nutrivore, and not only do I not feel deprived and I'm enjoying the foods I'm eating, but I'm also down 30 pounds, right? So you get that flavor. Or not only that, but my cholesterol's dropped. Not only that, but my blood pressure's gone down. So that is the dominant feedback, is people feeling like they're eating a healthier diet while just having so much less stress and anxiety about food choice, and really feeling like that permissive approach is liberating them from feeling trapped from diet culture. And then there's always the health coach or the nutritionist who is just finding the resources super helpful for working with their clients, or right, there's that other 10% that's a very sort of different vibe of feedback. And I would say, especially on social media, people love learning positive facts about food, right? Hey, did you know that watermelon is the best source of L-citrulline? L-citrulline, the same thing that's in your pre-workout supplements to help with your endurance during your workout and your muscle recovery, right? Did you know that iceberg lettuce has more nutrients per calorie than celery?
That surprises me.
It surprises me too. But the math is the law. That's the cool thing about math. It just calculates, and that's all it does. It's not a meaningful difference. I mean, it's not. They're basically equivalent in terms of their nutrients per calorie and their health effects. But I think it's so cool that we've got all these ways who would judge poor iceberg lettuce as being, nutritionally cardboard or crunchy water. And it's a very nutritious food. If you like other lettuce types, they've got more nutrients. But if you only like iceberg, go for it. It's still a great food. And that's what I love about the Nutri-Score calculation, but just that lens of looking at the nutrients that foods have. Is it it really helps, I think, in that recovery from restrictive mindsets, because you can look at all of the things you're missing out on by not eating lentils, Sarah, right? That's what I saw. And sure enough, boy, did I feel a lot better when I added lentils in.
On that note, like, what did feeling better become for you? How did that show up? What are some of the outcomes that you personally have experienced as you've made this transition?
So the biggest difference in my health manifests as resilience to stress.
Yeah.
That is, for me, the biggest thing. I have been able to be more productive at work and sleep better, but a more present parent. I've got 2 teenage daughters now. And so, I used to joke when they were little that like parenting is personal chef and pack mule and chauffeur. And now that they're teenagers, you add like live-in therapist to the task list, right? But it allows me to be able to navigate, I think, situations that are really challenging as a parent of teenagers. And I'm able to just find this like peace and clear-headedness and calm to be able to go through those situations and just be like the best, most supportive parent that I can be in situations that I think a lot of me, not just a lot of other people, but me at another time in my life, I would have found very triggering and would have probably had me in fight or flight. And instead, I'm able to just be present. I'm able to have a stressful thing happen at work and just get straight to solution-oriented mindset. I'm able to balance my different to-do lists, right? And that is something I've always sort of said that's like stress is my Achilles heel, right? Stress is the thing that always gets to me. And in 13 years now, as a leading voice in the wellness community, if you look at my first 8-ish years of that, you can see every time I like ran myself into the ground and had just like massively crashed and had months of recovery, and then did it again, and then did it again, and did it again. And I just haven't had that happen like since 2020, since I really sort of completed this transition. I hope it won't happen again. I don't know. I don't think I'm immune to running myself into the ground.
And I don't think you are either.
I probably could if I tried real hard. But I think that is more like testament to my higher level of resiliency. And I think a large part of that is less stress around food. I eat dessert almost every day. I make room for it. It makes me happy. It is my quality of life food. And
what was that? Your quality of life food?
It's my quality of life food.
What is?
Yeah. It's dessert.
Dessert is your quality of life food. And
some small
category.
Yes. Whatever.
Awesome.
Is it a sugary baked good or a frozen good? Then that is my quality of life food. Yes, please. Would love that. And so just having like less stress around food, I think objectively I'm getting more nutrients, right? But I found just my consistency, like my diet just looks the same day to day, in the sense that it looks completely different because I have a really high dietary diversity. But I don't have like periods of time where I just have to resort to eating the same foods because I don't have the mental energy to mix it up.
Right.
And then I don't have those moments where I way overdo something. Like I still overdo things, but not way overdo things, right? So I think, that's been a huge part of it. But also in the same period of time, that's when I got my dog, who has been the most amazing little shadow. She is my heart dog. She's the dog that when I'm like 90 years old, reminiscing about my life, she's the dog I'll be talking about. She's just the most amazing soul. And we hike 3-4 miles every morning in the woods, unplugged. And so I've made other changes in the same period of time that I know have contributed to my resiliency. I can't say that it's all nutrivore. It's partly nutrivore. Also in that same period of time, I went through the menopause, which not a fan, zero stars. But I finally got to start estrogen, and I know that also has helped my mental health a lot. So there's also a pharmaceutical aspect. So I don't want to ignore the contribution that so much wonderful estrogen hormone has done for me. But yeah, I mean, I would say resiliency is the biggest change in me now versus 5 years ago.
Awesome. I am sure there are a lot of people craving resiliency that they don't feel they have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, life can be a lot sometimes.
It is.
The universe does university things. And so
Not messing around.
Right. But I sort of, like I'll sometimes say, I was like, oh, life was lifing today, right? Like, I mean, we still all have days. And I don't want to give the impression that I'm like this Zen unicorn at all times. But yeah, I just have a much higher capacity to navigate situations calmly and recover from deadlines and other things that used to really wreck me. So yeah,
I've noticed,
and deep appreciation
that
for that.
I've noticed that too. It wasn't really until I finally found a way to include organ meats on a regular basis, because I hate liver, but I finally have found workarounds that work for me. And seafood, the oysters and the clams and the cold water fish, when I started including those regularly, because they consistently bumped up the nutrients I was most chronically deficient in, that's when I could start running half marathons again. That's when that resiliency to stress. When I get sick, it's so much more mild now, and I recover so much more quickly than I did in 2018 and earlier. It's that's the word. It's resiliency, both in physical and emotional. I can get away with a lot more wine and a lot more coffee too. I have mixed feelings about that.
I don't know that I've pushed my luck that way very much. I would say I'm much more psychologically resilient than I'm sitting here with muscle pain for my workouts this week. So I don't know that I can claim physical resiliency when I'm like,
you're not feeling it.
I'm like, yeah. But at the same time, when I first started working out, like so I do powerlifting now, but when I first started CrossFit, every 2 months, I would run myself into the ground, not be able to work out for a month, and then hurt for a month, and then have a good month, and then run myself into the ground again. So there's probably some stuff I need to talk to my therapist about. There's probably some things to work through right there. I feel like I've identified maybe another issue. Also,
you've discovered another gem, Sarah. You have discovered another gem
another that
you need to unearth.
But I just realized that's another thing that I should acknowledge has improved my resiliency is therapy. So therapy's great. I like therapy. My current therapist is amazing. So yes, she absolutely gets all the stars, every star. Health is complex, right? And even when we're talking about food and nutrition, we need to remember that diet plus lifestyle plus health-related behaviors accounts for 40 to 50% of health outcomes. There's a lot of things that are impacting our health and how we feel day to day that are not things within our power to control.
Right.
And so that, to me, that doesn't mean it's not worth it to work on 40 to 50% of health outcomes. That's still huge, right? That's still a big deal. I'm still going to put in that effort. But I think the other piece of this is understanding that there are things that we go through health-wise that have nothing to do with us, our choices, right? They're not our fault. It just is what it is. It's the unlucky luck of the draw. And I think that's liberating, right? I think that gives me permission to focus on long-term habit formation rather than having to race to get there. I get to figure out what is my path to, build those small little successes over time so that I can really make this sustainable. And also it just takes off that pressure, right? It's like, it isn't because I ate those food dyes, right? That one time that I had the box of, Fruit Loops, right? It is the complexity of genetics and the environment and social determinants of health and like things that I can't change. And those same things might be responsible for some of the best things in my life too. Right? Those genetics are why my brain holds on to fun nutrition facts so easily. So I'm going to appreciate those, even if they also mean, I also have susceptibility to certain types of illness. And so I think the appreciating how much diet can do for us, but also the limits of what it can do, I think is also like a really empowering way to approach food choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Nutrivora meal of the moment?
I have been making these lunch salads a few times per week. So whatever lettuce I have around, cucumber, tomatoes, sweet pepper, some kind of cheese. So cut up like cheddar, mozzarella, like something a little bit saltier I like.
Yeah.
And then cut up, cooked, like it's still warm, gluten-free chicken fingers.
Ooh, fun.
And mung bean salad topper. So like crunchy mung beans.
Yeah.
With like a tangy, like Italian type dressing. It is so delicious. It is like every good flavor. There's something about the cold cheese and vegetables and dressing, the still warm, adds cut up chicken fingers. Yeah, that is my favorite meal of the moment. I make it a few times. I make it a few times per week, and it's like a big salad. It is like every single time. I'm like, I think I might have overdone it. Nope, I finished it. I got it.
Can still do it. And my salads always are served in mixing bowls, and it's one serving for me.
Yes. Yeah. The one time I did it in a mixing bowl, I really did make it too big. So I have been doing dinner plates, but like loaded dinner plates. Yeah. I love that salad so much.
It sounds like, when I think about that salad, it sounds like the perfect salad for your inner child and the perfect salad for your nerdy adult. It's like all the parts of you get to come together and celebrate this salad because it's meeting everybody's needs.
Yeah, it's also just, I think what makes a good salad is contrast. So you've got tang and like the salty, cheesy umami, and then you've got the like carby, bready, proteiny, and then you've got the crunch from the salty edamame salad topper. Yeah, it's just kind of like every good thing working together. And it does not work with regular chicken. It has to be chicken fingers.
Oh yeah. Otherwise your inner child is like not satisfied.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my favorite meal right now. That's like making me want to make that for dinner.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I had asked you?
Oh, that's such a great question. Nothing pops into my mind as being like a thing that this conversation was missing. So, no, this was fun.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon.
I love this. Thank you so much for having me again.
If you have found some nuggets of wisdom, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share Blasphemous Nutrition with those you care about. As you navigate the labyrinth of health advice out there, remember, health is a journey, not a dietary dictatorship. Stay skeptical, stay daring, and challenge the norms that no longer serve you. If you've got burning questions or want to share your own flavor of rebellion, slide into my DMs. Your stories fuel me, and I love hearing them. Thanks again for tuning into Blasphemous Nutrition. Until next time, this is Amy signing off, reminding you that truth is nuanced, and any dish can be made better with a little bit of sass.